Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining and welcome back to another live session. And this afternoon, we're going to be looking at is Trinidad and Tobago becoming a data colony, the truth behind the shift. Now, what if the very thing meant to secure Trinidad and Tobago's future could quietly reshape its sovereignty? For decades, oil and gas powered the nation, fueling jobs, infrastructure, and economic stability. But today, a new resource is taking center stage: data. From massive data centers to AI infrastructure and the foreign tech partnerships, Trinidad is positioning itself for a digital future. The question is, at what cost? Is this smart evolution beyond oil or the beginning of a new kind of dependency? Who really benefits from this shift? Local citizens or global tech powers looking for a strategic foothold in the Caribbean? This evening, we are unpacking the promises, the risks, and the hidden trade-offs behind Trinidad's transition from oil to data, because the future isn't just about being built, it's being negotiated. So today we're going to be looking at this very important topic, about the data centers, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago. And it seems like it is a world agenda, global agenda, not only for Trinidad, but they might be experimenting first with Trinidad to see how that will be rolled out there and then roll it out in other parts of the region. Now, Trinidad and Tobago, there's reporting here, signs agreements with U.S. companies that pave the way for data centers. That's what they're telling us. And Trinidad and Tobago has signed agreements paving the way for U.S. companies to begin groundwork for installing large data centers in the Caribbean nations, sparking concerns about potential energy consumption and environmental impacts. The memorandums, now we are people talking about memorandums, it should be memoranda, of understanding with the Florida headquartered Hummingbird AI Holdings and New York-based Ernst and Young LLP were signed on Friday, according to a statement from the Office of Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Kamla Persa-Bissessar. These are the first such agreements with a Caribbean country. So they are actually using Trinidad, or they're going to use Trinidad as the blueprint, as the example for these rollout of data centers. Now, the deal with Ernst and Young LLP will set out the framework for collaboration on developing large-scale data centers, with the company planning to partner with third parties in the development of 300 megawatt data center, the statement said. The agreement with Hummingbird AI Holdings sets up the framework for preliminary cooperation, due diligence, and coordination for proposed 150 MWAI infrastructure and data center facility. Data centers are listed with a megawatt figure to indicate their electrical power capacity to operate at peak load. The 300 MW center has a capacity of 300 million watts of electricity. That's high. The deals raised online questions about the environmental impact of the centers. Renowned social activist Dr. Wayne Kubel-Sink told the Associated Press he was concerned about the energy consumption by the planned data centers. They're also concerned about water and the amount of water that a given AI data center is going to consume. So we are in trouble, and we don't even understand what is behind and the agenda behind all of this. Now, there are people for and against what is happening in Trinidad. And here we're saying, is TNT being targeted for data center dumping? That's a question that is being asked right there in Trinidad and Tobago. Public concern about the MOUs signed by the government to build data centers in Trinidad is based on facts, not hallucinations, to use an AI-related term. There is a history of U.S. companies exporting their polluting industries to developing countries. This is no different, and the exploitation of developing countries continue. In the 1960s, US and European firms shifted asbestos processing, pesticide production, and other hazardous manufacturing to Latin America, South and Southeast Asia. This was in response to the US let me get this thing off my screen, US and Europe enacting environmental laws to protect the environment, requiring the firms to make, instead of investing to meet the standards, they sent their polluting industries to the developing world, which they always do. This is the context of the 1984 Bhopal disaster in India, where Union Carbide operated a pesticide plant. The people of Bhopal continue to suffer serious health problems without compensation from the US company. Will that happen in Trinidad? It is yet to see. But many people are suggesting that the data centers are going to cause tremendous health hazards, right? Including could be cancer, chest pains, among other illnesses. Industrialized nations began shipping toxic waste to developing countries for disposal, a trend that grew large enough to prompt the 1989 Basel Convention regulating transboundary hazardous waste movement. The governments in the receiving countries either exchanged the health of the environment and its peoples for a monetary payment, were duped into receiving the toxic waste, or had no knowledge of the dumping. In 1986 and 1988, Haiti was a victim of dumping of toxic waste from the United States. The Haitian ministry issued an import permit for a shipment labeled as topsoil fertilizer. And by the way, in the documentary Life and Death, it was reported that the United States was actually sending rotten chicken to Haiti, or they sent it to Jamaica first, rather, and Jamaica declined it, and then they said, sorry, it was on its way to Haiti. Right? That is what they did. So they sent the raw chicken to Jamaica, imported raw chicken there. And when they refused it in Jamaica, they said, oh, we're sorry, it should have been sent to Haiti. It was, in fact, ashes from burnt municipal waste that contained toxic materials. Once Greenpeace informed the government of the true origins of the product, the permit was rescinded and an order issued for the product to be reloaded, but the ship had already fled. Nigerian authorities found over 2,000 drums of toxic waste in the small fishing village of Coco, transported by a front enterprise owned by Italian entrepreneur Gianfranco Raffaelli. The waste was disguised as building materials and stored in a local residence yard for US $100 a month. The national government had no knowledge. Locals engaged in duplicity to earn money. Governments were tempted by offers of substantial revenue for accepting wastes, but lacked the technology or administrative capacity to dispose of them safely. Some of this trade was illegal, but much was not, with waste entering countries covertly through bribes or mislabeling. And our governments continue to support these sort of toxicity. Now, why am I writing about export of pollution industries and dumping of toxic waste in developing countries? The building of data centers is no different. All over the United States, communities are protesting the building of data centers, and municipal governments are passing legislation that bars data centers from access to municipal water and electricity. A very recent example is in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, where local authorities and the company Valaha Holding labeled the project as converting the former Collier kitchen and bath manufacturing plant into a US 2.8 billion to 3 billion US dollars high performance computing facility. The public was deceived into thinking that it was a computer center that was being developed. Only when the project started did the full facts come to light. Massive protest against the air pollution from 80-foot chimneys emitting carbon dioxide and carcinogenic fumes, and the demand for water and electricity by data centers depriving residents of much needed utility supplies have led to a one-year moratorium on the project. So let us talk about the carcinogenic fumes. And they're telling us that they are, they believe in renewables, right? And yet still look at what they're doing. Look at what they are doing. Any Trinidadian which or who watches the US news will have heard of the massive protests taking place all over the US as communities refuse to have data centers in their area. In Trinidad and Tobago, there is no such protest at all. At least 75 projects worth more than 130 billion US dollars were blocked or delayed in just the first 3 months of 2026, matching the scale of opposition seen across all of 2025. Active opposition groups grew from 396 at the end of 2025 to 833 by the end of March 2026, spanning 49 states. And New York has now passed legislation banning the building of data centers for 1 year. Now, for 1 year, so they've put a pause on it, but will the pause be, discontinued? Now, why do you think that US companies are now looking to developing countries to accept data centers? They are running out of options in the US because people are sensible enough to protest and drive them out. In the Caribbean, we are not that sensible, are we? Protecting their health and access to adequate electricity and water supply. In the 1960s, polluting US companies were no longer welcome at home because of strict environmental laws. Similarly, data centers in the United States are running out of options because people are refusing to have them built in their communities. These companies are seducing our government with promises of substantial revenues and employment generation while exporting their polluting industries. This is no different from the seduction of leaders in developing countries with promises that never materialize. And we always hear of these dot-com era and how they're going to create jobs and what is going to happen, and they never materialize. 500 employed is just for construction, right? 500 employed is just for construction. And that is going to be what? Temporary, because after whatever they've built is finished, then your job is done, right? Once a center is built, a few dozen may be employed. Enough is being said on social media and in the press with statistics of pollution and the demands for electricity and water by data centers. The demand for water for cooling the equipment is so great that China is proposing building data centers beneath the sea. At least they are sensible. At least the Chinese people are sensible. A historical view anchored in a political economy analysis may help us to understand the underlying logic of the modus operandi of big tech in advancing their agenda for maximizing the pace of AI development. Data centers are needed to filter the data collected from the internet and the platforms and prepare them for storing on the cloud, all owned by the 4 big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon. My point here is to say that once more, we are targeted for dumping. This time, the polluting data centers, whose carcinogenic emissions can cause cancer in the population and overall health deterioration, increase our carbon footprint exponentially, damage the fragile environment, and leave us poorer in multiple ways. Because once your health is gone, your health is destroyed, then you are in poverty. Because, well, health is wealth. So, Mr. Minister, and Madam Prime Minister, the people of Trinidad and Tobago are not being alarmists and naysayers. There are serious problems with accepting data centers to be located here, and I urge everyone to examine the facts and act in the interest of the people of this country and the region at large. So we're seeing here where people are actually telling the government that this is going to be a serious crisis. And I would advance that it's also a population reduction agenda. Because when we get sick, I'm sure that they're going to tell us that, we also have vaccines for AI and for the AI data centers. Because that is how they make money. We must understand that these people are not there just to, provide a service, but they're there to make money. It is a corporation. So let's get into some of the some of the videos and the commentaries and begin to talk about what is really happening and how people are commenting on the dangers of these data centers. Okay, so we'll start off with one of such videos. It's coming up, so we just have to wait until it comes up. So this is what we are living in some very, very strange times, and we just have, let's begin with the MOU data center that they have just signed, and then we are going to continue with our conversation. Is it gone? It has been there? Okay, so let me get it on the stage.
Signs agreement with US companies that pave the way for data centers. So soon we will have data centers in Trinidad. I can hear the questions coming in. If data centers are so important, why not just build all of them over there in America? It's not like they don't have the space for it. The USA is 50% empty space anyway, so they have the land. And when it comes to computers and data centers, distance is the enemy. Latency slows things down. So why would they choose to put it all the way over here and not in their backyard? Well, the truth is they did build quite a few, but then they quickly ran into some opposition. Nothing too major, just a little, don't build that here, don't build that over there, now you can't put that here. Because turns out, most of them are very, very, very loud. They also consume large amounts of water. How much ever you're thinking right now, quadruple that and then add tax on it. Large amounts, with the larger ones being able to use as much as 4 million gallons of water per day, which is equivalent to a tongue of about 40,000 people over there in America. Then you have the small insignificant issue of these servers using large amounts of electricity. We're not talking about your neighbor burning too much current, like we're talking about the entirety of Diego Martin, what we just use in a single day. Yeah, a lot, which is why many people don't want them in their cities, they don't want them in their towns, and they certainly don't want them in their backyards, which left them to have to outsource locations, and here we are. Now, there are pros and cons to everything, and there are some data centers that are smaller and use less water, but even them have large environmental impacts. But what can we do? We can't protest. We can't mount any proper challenge because right now we are under communist rules. So the minute you mount any kind of challenge, even on social media, one day you're a good person, next day you're a gang leader being hauled off under a preventative detention order. Now does go? You're arrested without charge, you're locked up without charge, and then you're in a detention center for 1 month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years without charge. Most of the lawyers right now are afraid to speak up because they're afraid they might get government work later on. So this is a whole mess we are in. But my question is, in a country that at any given point in time does have interruptions in power, they call it overhead line maintenance, I call it rolling blackouts. But if we have issues with electricity, like in Diego Martin, I think once a month coroners go in my area. And at the same time, we're having water issues. And you are bringing something that uses large amounts of water and power. Do we have the excess capacity for something like that? And if we do, then why not just give your citizens a serious question? Because those data centers can't run dry. They run dry and billions go up in smoke. So they need a constant water supply. So if you all have somehow figured out a way to give them a constant water supply, then why can't I also have a constant water supply? Also, the irony isn't lost on me. That is the same scamp that was talking about the smelter plant was bad for the environment. And the same scamp who had their proxies over in Tobago trying to prevent sandals from going to Tobago. She was the biggest environmentalist then, but all of a sudden, when she's bringing an ecological disaster to our shores, no word on that. But hey, well, they're good, yes?
Okay, so we're seeing here where they're telling us that they're doing things, right? But they're not transparent in what they're doing, right? People don't know all of the clauses, the conditions expressed in the MOU. And isn't that what they always do? Even with the pandemic, everything that they do, economic trades, they always give us the surface level reasoning and excuses for what they're doing. And it's always to give us more jobs, right? And to diversify the economy. And these things sound well, from a surface level. But when we look deeper at what they're doing, then we can see that this is a darker agenda that we have to be careful of. Now, somebody's suggesting that, they're watching football, they're watching the World Cup. Do you know the same people who are responsible for the World Cup and funding the World Cup are the same people ready to kill you, right? So what do you prefer? Do you prefer World Cup and all of that, what is happening? Or do you prefer to listen and to be alert, to be vigilant as to what is happening in the world? And that is why they're getting away with what they're doing, because we prefer what? bread and circus. They know that, they provide it for us, and then we end up getting killed, right? And by the way, we are not here to this all bro thing. I don't want anybody to call this bro thing. Use another language. I don't, this bro thing, get rid of this to get, right? Get some better language to use on this program. Okay, so let's now move on to another situation in which they're explaining to us, because I'm going to make it quick so you can go back to your bread and circus, if you will. So let me get to another one where we have here the pros and the cons. Somebody's going to lay out to us the pros and the cons of Trinidad's data center when it shall have been installed over there. So let's now pull up that. What are some of the pros and the cons of this?
Let's get the facts straight on these proposed AI data centers. On Tuesday, New York State imposed a ban on new AI data centers, citing its threats to New York's power grid, driving up the cost of electricity and its environmental impact. Meanwhile, in Trinidad, Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar said, "Get off your high horse about the environment, because Trinidad and Tobago is already a dump of a nation." It's quite sickening that this is what the leader of Trinidad and Tobago says about her own country when the world is watching. Anyways, let's talk about the facts. First, we need to clear up two misconceptions that even the UNC government doesn't seem to understand. AI data centers aren't actually about storing data. They largely exist to increase global compute capacity for AI large language models. Despite the name, it really has nothing to do with storing data, which is the purpose of cloud data centers. So UNC ministers should get that right before they begin to push their propaganda. Second, and most importantly, the MOU states that the government is establishing frameworks for cooperation and due diligence. They have not spoken about actual investors, actual plans to build anything, or any dollar amounts. Who's funding this? Right now, nobody. Regardless, let's objectively look at the pros and the cons here. The pro side, Trinidad and Tobago desperately needs economic diversification, the potential for job creation. However, most of these jobs would likely be temporary in construction. AI data centers don't really need more than maybe 100 or so people to keep the lights on. So be careful with this 5,000 number that the government is quoting. Most likely, that isn't real. On the con side, 450 megawatts represents an astronomical 50% increase in Trinidad and Tobago's daily average power consumption. That's equivalent to adding 700,000 people to the country's electrical grid. While Trinidad has the theoretical capacity for this, at peak demand it likely can't support this power draw, and this is exactly why New York has imposed its ban. Potentially up to 5 million gallons of water could be required per day to cool these systems, depending on how the centers are built. That's enough to cause the taps in certain cities to run dry. Then there's the environmental concerns like huge amounts of electronic waste, which the Prime Minister doesn't seem to care about. There's loud diesel backup generators and large amounts of noise pollution. So is this all worthwhile? The MOUs were short on details. This is only about establishing frameworks. Who are the investors? Who's creating the jobs? Who's running the facility? There are hundreds of questions that very likely nobody has the answer to.
Well, and that is a pretty good objective analysis of this data system, right? Because he's laying to us the pros and the cons, because sometimes we just look at the cons and not the pros, right? And he's suggesting that it will help to generate some jobs. Might not be a lot of jobs, as they're telling us, and those jobs might be temporary jobs, but it will give people some jobs. However, the diversification of the economy is something that is also well needed. Trinidad and Tobago has always been relied on oil and gas, and economists over the years have been telling them to diversify the economy. So we are suggesting that perhaps this might be the beginning stages of diversifying the economy. But when we look at the other cons, the cons of this, health problems, when we look at the consumption of water, and many Trinidadians are suggesting that the WASA, the company that gives them water in their taps, cannot provide water for a lot of times for Trinidadians, so they don't have access a lot of times to water in their taps. Now, if this system, the AI system, is going to consume so much of this, precious commodity, water, what's going to happen? It means, therefore, that people are going to see that they are not getting any water for a length of time, because they're going to devote their time and the consumption to this thing, the AI, because this is the agenda they're pushing towards. Now, one of the things we also have to understand is the digital economy. And for the digital economy to be rolled out, AI is a big part of it. The data centers will play a role in the rollout of the digital economy. So they're not moving behind. So even in the United States where they're protesting, that might be for a while, but it's not going to stop the digital agenda that they have for the economy. So this is something that we have to watch and we have to be very closely vigilant about. Not to mention our health. Will these also cause terrible cancers? We already know that people are suggesting that our cell phones that we use often are causing that, brain cancers, different form of cancers, because of the waves that they emit. So when we look at what is happening with these data centers, and they're huge, and they contain lots of cloud and the technological information, we are in big trouble with our health. And we don't hear the doctors talking much about it and what possibly can come. But I can assure you that they're going to have vaccines and other medications to solve the problem, as they think that they will be able to do, which they are not going to be able to do, but they're going to pretend as if they can. Now let's go over to can Trinidad cope with AI data, an AI data center? All right, we're going to look at that and to see if they can cope with that, because we want to look at the different commentaries out there and the pros and the cons of this very dangerous
to
equipment
put
or
a
technology.
data center, an AI data center in Trinidad and Tobago. A simple Google search will explain to you just how much water and electricity is needed to power and cool a data center. I mean, you could run an entire village with it. In Trinidad and Tobago, it is no secret that many of us have no reliable or regular water supply. Some of us go for weeks without water in our taps. There are communities that complain that there is no electricity daily. We have power outages. At least once a week, electricity goes. And the irony of it all is that UNC's PRO this week was talking about, asking why was Blue Waters allowed to export water while none of us had water in our taps. Mm-hmm. Yet days after, his government, his party, are trying to convince us that we have the infrastructure needed to put up an AI data center. Either, maybe, there is somebody going after Blue Waters because they want the facility, which actually sets up really nice for an AI data center. But I don't know. Everything's fishy these days. Nothing makes sense these days. I thought Rowley was bad. I don't know what to say again. That's why I don't know. I don't have the energy anymore. Because what are we going to do? Go back to PNM? I'm not seeing any third parties really looking like they're serious about giving us a proper option. I do like Penny, to be honest. But I don't know if PNM, the organization, is something I could ever really support. But, yeah. Anyways, people, go and do some research. Check out the water consumption, the environmental concerns with putting an AI center in Trinidad and Tobago, and ask yourself if you're really ready for it. And yeah, some questions need to be asked. Are we going to see that they're going after Blue Waters because they actually want to put an AI center on their land?
Very well said. And for young Miss from Trinidad, you can see that she's able to think. And one of the things that she mentioned, in addition, of course, to the fact that the high water consumption and electricity, she's mentioned the fact that our system does not make any sense, right? She's exhausted. And those of us who are able to think right, are exhausted because everything we look at does not make any sense. So it's almost like you're tired to even talk about the same thing because you're repeating the same thing over and over. People are not opening, their eyes are not opening because they are not willing to listen, they're not willing to learn. It's better to be on a football match than to be talking about something as important as this. But when we react to now, when the cancers and other things now, or they bomb or anything that happens that make you feel uncomfortable, then you begin now everything begins to implode and you begin to be very scared. That is not how intelligent people think and how society should operate. Now, if we are going to be operating based on fear, then the government is going to get away with everything. And what she's suggesting here is that neither the UNC nor the PNM would have made a difference in this, because this is agenda that they are not actually, they are on board with, right? Whether the UNC or the PNM, they're actually on board with that sort of system. Now we have that there are no jobs in AI data centers. He's saying the initial building of the center will create jobs, but once built, very minimal jobs will be created. Absolutely. And we don't know the hazards that will happen, the health hazards as a result of these, data centers. How will it affect the population from a health perspective? This is something that we are not also talking much about. Okay, but it's certainly going to affect our health, because nothing that you have that consumes so much data, and it's going to emit certain sort of toxins in the environment, then we are going to be troubled by it, obviously. She missed on her reporting, not sure what you're saying here, and somebody's saying here that we do not need that here. Too many cons. Absolutely. And that is the whole thing. When you're deciding to work on implement such a big, grandiose project, you have to look at the pros, and you also have to look at the cons and see if the cons outweigh the pros. And now what we're looking at, it seems like the cons outweigh the pros. Let's continue to look at some other analysis, but that was quite a good analysis of what is about to transpire. Now, somebody's reporting here the hidden cost of data centers, and that's what we're going to be looking at now, the hidden cost of data centers. Let me put that on the screen.
About data centers.
Here's the raw, unchained truth about data centers. Data centers are the physical backbone of the AI arms race, and they are quietly becoming one of the most destructive and resource-intensive industrial projects in human history, all while being sold to the public as clean tech and the future. The brutal reality is that training and running modern AI models is insanely energy hungry. A single large training run can consume more electricity than entire cities for months. The biggest models now require data centers packed with tens of thousands of GPUs running 24/7 at full power. Tech giants are in a frantic, no-holds-barred race to build hundreds of new hyperscale data centers. Many are the size of several football fields and generate enormous amounts of heat. They're sucking down water for cooling at rates that are already causing problems in drought-prone areas. Projections show data centers could consume 8 to 15% plus of total US electricity by 2030-2035. That's not a small number. That's civilization-scale power demand appearing almost overnight. They're getting massive hidden subsidies and sweetheart deals, driving new fossil fuel power plants, creating enormous e-waste, and putting serious strain on local communities and electrical grids. Unchained bottom line. The AI revolution is not some clean, magical leap into the future. It's a brutal, energy-guzzling, resource-devouring industrial explosion happening behind layers of slick marketing. Data centers are the modern equivalent of 19th century factories, except they consume electricity and water at terrifying scale while producing mostly hype, surveillance tools, and replacement-level automation. The public is being fed the fantasy of benevolent, world-changing AI, while the real cost, environmental, financial, and societal, is being externalized and downplayed. This is not sustainable. It's a new gold rush with massive hidden consequences.
Now, you talk about that the AI, what we call, these, technologies and so forth, are more intelligent right now than human beings. You know that we're dumb. We are dumb, and that is why the fact is that our governments are getting away because the population is not very concerned about what is happening. They're too distracted by what is happening around them rather than speaking about substantive issues like this. So what is going to happen now is that the government is going to roll it out, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not, the government is going to have a rollout, and then we are going to witness now the development of different diseases, of people saying that they have cancers of which they don't know how they got it, right? Because this is how we behave. Now, if we take this matter more seriously, then I think that the government would not be able to do it. But the government can get away with doing it in Trinidad and perhaps in other part of the Caribbean because people are distracted. They talk about other things that are not at the center, the root causes of our problems. And this is going to affect the way in which we are going to be able to survive in this country and the region. Because talk about surveillance. This is not just about health too. This is the beginning of the digital economy, which is going to track and trace everything we do. And it's going to control our speech, our movements. Even some people are concerned about in the United States that these people are coming to take over their properties, that they're using their properties and stealing their properties, saying that these are centers or places to be used for the creation or the manufacture of these data centers. Now, this is something that is ludicrous, and they are actually violating our freedoms or rights, but that is where the world is moving into because people are more distracted and interested in entertainment rather than what their governments are doing. So keep on being entertained. Now, let's look at another, talking about fresh water. Why is this that these data centers are just using, why can't we just use any water? Why can't it be, dirty water? But they're saying, no, it has to be fresh water that has to be used. So look at what she's saying here about the system and what it needs
water,
to work.
This video is for you. We've all seen it. A 100-word email written by AI uses the same amount of fresh water as a water bottle. But how? And why can't the water be reused? These are just a few of the questions we've seen, in addition to questions about why we can't use fans, AC, or salt water. So let's figure it out. AI data centers are warehouses with computer servers that run on electricity. This electrical energy makes the servers and facilities hot. So to prevent both from breaking and overheating, they need consistent cooling. This is where water comes in. Data centers use a process called evaporative cooling to cool their facilities, a process where hot air is met with cold water forming steam. Fans then push this air out of the data center, and around 80% of the water used evaporates during this process. The remaining water is cycled a few times to help cool the servers, but over time this leads to salt, mineral, and bacteria deposits. These can cause clogs or corrode equipment. So to stop this from happening, they must continually add fresh water and discharge overcycled water as wastewater. This is also why salt water isn't a suitable substitute. Historically, many data centers did rely on AC and fans to cool their facilities, but many have now switched to evaporative cooling because it's more energy efficient and can handle higher temperatures. The trade-off? Higher freshwater consumption, all at the expense of people, communities, and the planet. We're calling for a national moratorium on the construction of new data centers now, to ensure that we have clean air and water for future generations. Learn more at foe.org.
Yeah, somebody's actually saying here that I told them not to. Let me put this off. Take this off the screen. I told them not to blame the government. What you're saying, Petra? That I told you not to blame the government, so we should sit down and be. Now, remember what the context in which I said that. Two things. One, you can't blame one government, as the Trinidadian was suggesting, if the PNM would have done the same thing. But they belong to a system, and the system has been nurtured because of our ignorance. The system has been nurtured because of the ignorance of the people within the system. And we are the people, And as a result of that, because of our ignorance and the fact that we are not focused on what needs to be focused on, then we're looking at some very, trite things like Mia Motley and think that after she goes, then the system is going to change. And that is within the context I'm saying that we can't just blame one person, because this is a system of which they are a part. And we must look at the system. And if the system were educating us and in the right way, I think that we could beat the system. However, but we are not educated. All right. Right now, the AI is much more intelligent than many of us. Right. And that is what the problem is. So they are winning because we don't understand the system, and because of our lack of understanding of the system and the fact that we're distracted, then they are winning. But it's not that they would have won had we been more educated. And that is what why the founding fathers in the United States said that the Constitution was written for an educated populace. If the populace is not educated, they can't understand the Constitution, they can't understand their rights. And when they don't understand their rights, understanding that governments are not there to give them rights, but are there to uphold it through the Constitution, then they are going to lose the battle. And we are living with a population now that is more interested, as I'm suggesting, in entertainment than in politics. So that is what we are dealing at the moment with. And Simon Shaw is saying you can use acts to school them. It has to be designed right. Is that so? Well, tell us what. Tell them that they can use that, because are they going to use it? As we're saying, that is not only about the cooling down of the system. It has to do with water consumption. And I'm sure that even if you are using acts, you have to have water. So the whole matter of it, that water is important. We're hearing that the Chinese are using the system and they're going underground with it. So instead of having it on land, they're having it underground, or getting the water from underground. How they are doing it, maybe we should learn from the Chinese how they're doing that. But what they're doing right now is not good. Now, which system should we try? Now, what do you mean by which system should we try? There is no system that is going to be tried if you don't think about the system. The system that we have now is not working. What you think that there's going to be, one of the things I find about us, we think that this is a microwave where you go into a microwave and you just take out some milk and you just drink it because that's the option to what you're going. This requires serious thinking and serious thought process. Do you think that the founding fathers, for example, and those who fought for freedom, it came over one day, right? It took centuries for them, and even now, Obama will tell you that the experiment needs to be even further refined. Okay, because it's not going to come overnight, and we are so accustomed to convenience by just putting in something and pressing a key, a button, and we have everything at our disposal, and it doesn't work like that. As we now have been saying, the system in its current form is not working because they're not listening to us. So and why are they not listening to us? Because they realize that we are not as educated as we should be. They know that. They know the system of education has dumbed us down, so we are not aware of how government functions. And because we are not aware and we don't want to know, and we want to be just involved in gossiping and political theater, then they can do whatever they want to do. Okay, and that is so even though they might put a pause on it right now, they're going to continue with it. No to communism. Well, guess what? You can say no, but the fact of the matter is you have to fight for that. You can't just say no and just remain, quiet. There are other systems that don't use water, but they have their other environmental issues. Okay, so let's hear about that. What other systems don't use water for this system? Can you clarify that for us, Climate Show? And then we have, come on, capitalism or communism, choose one. Well, that is not how the system works. As I've told you, in the United States, you have communism is what they use for the military, socialism. The military, if you look at the military in its current form in the United States, when you also look at the United States, which says it's capitalist, right? Which says it's capitalist, when you look at the elites and these millionaires, they get money from us, right? They steal money from us. They rob from Peter to give to them. right? So that's a form of communism. That's a form of socialism. So there is no sort of system, pure system, as you're saying, in this world as we are at this point in time. Now, then we have, so you're saying capitalism versus communism. Then we have their, is saying, Angel, they are involving themselves in things that they do not have proper knowledge of, but talking out the side, both sides of their mouth. Correct. Right? We have to be serious, you know, and because we're not serious, they understand that, and they understand that they can get away with a million and more things because of our idiocy. And it's sad because the AI understands exactly that this is dangerous. The AI system understands, the AI itself understands that it should not be merged with humans. It should not be in close contact or in competition with human resources. But we don't understand that, right? And tomorrow, if a scientist comes up and says that, oh, it can be used, then we believe what he or she's saying. Now, let's move on to another one. I don't know when we're going to grow up, but I have to continue to do what I'm doing. Now, let's get now to another thing. Why AI zero conflict with humans? Look at what this is saying. We should have zero contact with humans, you know, the data centers rather. Let me.
I certainly don't like the data centers that have to feed the beast. That is going to take all of our resources. And I asked, tell me where you would put all the data centers in the United States. And the response was, if I had to redesign the entire data center network for the United States from scratch, I would place them based on one single rule: zero conflict with human resources. I had a woman reach out to me that was in Vegas and went past the big switch data center. She started noticing immediately that her chest started burning. It was like burning through her skin, her pacemaker. And she went into AFib. These data centers and energy that they need to survive will take all of these resources all at once, not just water, not just one city, and not just a low electrical. We're talking the whole grid. We're talking the whole infrastructure. We're talking the entire water supply.
So even the AI knows that this system is dangerous to be placed with humans, along with human resources. It's dangerous. The AI system knows that. So why doesn't our government know that? Or is it because they know that, just like they knew the vaccines were actually damaging to the system, but they still continue to say that it is 100% effective, right? So they know what they're doing. They know that many of us will die. They know that many of us will die, will contract diseases, but it is profitable for them. It is what? Profitable for them doing it. Not only is it profitable, but it accomplishes their goal of reducing, to some extent, the human population. Because they see us as pests. We see these things as pests and as hazardous to our, health, and they see us as the population, the global population, as hazardous also to their wealth. And we have to now understand that this is the real agenda that they're playing with us. Very important that we understand these things. Now let's go on to another clip that I shared with you about this whole AI, data centers that we're seeing developing here in the Caribbean region, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this is telling us that in the United States, they're actually taking away your land. So,
the home your family has lived in for years is going to be demolished to help power the AI boom, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. That is what is happening to some homeowners in Georgia. They've been given an ultimatum: sell your home or the state will take it. Utility giant Georgia Power is planning to build a new transmission line so it can handle new data centers.
To us, it's theft. It's literally $1 billion company stealing land from smaller people who can't fight back. We don't have the money to fight Georgia Power.
What did your mom tell you she wanted for this property to be?
Generational wealth. So I have a young daughter. This home is supposed to go to her. True generational wealth was the idea, and now it's being stripped from us.
Georgia Power estimates 70 to 80% of the power on this new line is expected to help serve data centers, being built in part to support the growing demands of artificial intelligence. It says the remaining 20 to 30% of power will serve the state's growing residential and commercial demand.
All power generation starts somewhere.
Holly Lovett is a Georgia Power spokesperson.
We take into factor our customers, first and foremost. They are at the center of our business and the core of what we do. We want them to be able to have their daily lives. And we take that seriously. It is something needed for survival. And we empathize with these community members who are seeing this growth.
Georgia Power told us that they feel as if they've done this process responsibly. What would you say to that?
I disagree. You can't tear down 35 miles of rural Georgia and it not hurt something or somebody. And to say that you're doing it in the name of data centers is a slap in the face to us, our community, our animals.
Right. Even the animals, she mentioned a very good point here. Even the animals, we don't know what impact that this thing is also going to have on the lives of creatures, the beast. Now, this is something that we have to look at. Now, what if they now are going to tell us that we have to remove from our properties? What will Trinidadians say when they hear that they might have to remove to another location and their property is stolen, as it's being done in the United States? Right? What are you going to do? Okay? How are you going to reclaim the right to your property? How are you going to challenge the government when they're telling you that they have to diversify the economy, they have to create jobs? And some people are just, they have to create jobs. Everything can create job, but how beneficial is that job to you? And how temporary, is it permanent or is it temporary? Right? And some people are suggesting that it's going to be only for the Indians, but will that also be permanently a permanent job? These are some of the questions that we have. Now, somebody's saying, look at how China placed their data centers. Well, China is not a free country, right? That is what we have to understand. China is not entirely a free country. China is an authoritarian country, and I think that we are, what should I say now, living in that delusional world, thinking that if our world becomes like China, that we are going to be all right, and we're going to live like the Chinese people. And first of all, many of us would not want to live like the Chinese people. We look at things superficially, and then we say that we envy how this person is living, and we don't know and understand the culture. But we just see what we see. Maybe we've been to China for a few months and so on, and we think that that is what the life is, when culture needs years to study and to understand. But we're not willing to do that, are we? China is setting the pace for on AI. Well, yeah, because that is where we're going towards. We're going towards authoritarianism, and I think that is what our populace wants and deserves. Now, we have here is saying the handful of jobs needed to run AI centers will be given to the Indians and foreigners. The fact is that that is true because, one, they are going to say that they are trained, the foreigners are trained in dealing with AI. Many of our people are not trained in that area. So that is what they're going to say. Now, capitalism is failing. Please come with something interesting, Simon Show. I don't want the childish behavior here now, right? Try to grow up. It's time to grow up and stop the foolishness. Now we have China is using the sea, right? That's what they're telling us, that China is using under the water, which makes sense. At the end of the day, we must understand, though, that the data system is not just about health, though, it's about also controlling and surveilling us. Do we want to live in a system that constantly surveil everything that we do and control our movements? Okay, so it's not just only health problems. We have itemized that already, but we also have to look at the social aspect of it, the economic aspect of it, which involves control. Even what we purchase, everything that we do, the information that we share, that we have shared publicly, will be sent all over the world. Okay, and that is what we have to understand. Okay, that is what we have to understand. Okay. So, and yes, yeah. When you begin to say something that is substantive, the Simon Show, then we can, because this is not a program for young people, for children. Then we have, yes, the biggest point, constant surveillance, and that is what it's going to do. That's the point of it. We're saying that we're moving, they're morphing us, they're transitioning us into the digitalized economy. And for that to happen, they will have to have these data systems, right? And that is what they're doing. Now, remember that Trinidad is only the blueprint. That is a testing ground, but it's also going to be in other countries in the region and throughout the world, right? That is what we have to understand. Okay, so let's move with other analyses so that we can get an understanding of where we are going, because the future is dim, right? The future is dim. And many of us are playing, but when our eyes are open, we're going to cry. Now, hopefully we'll be alive too, because I think many of us are going to die. Now, let's go on to AI. Is also meant to censor what the government does not want you to say. Now, if you notice the algorithm on YouTube, it censors what you say and it controls the free flow of information. So when people talk about independent journalism, there is no independent journalism, because the whole matter of journalism on these platforms is controlled by algorithm. And if the algorithm does not want to share what you have to say, it's not going to share it. And nothing can stop it from not sharing it. I want you to understand that. If the algorithm, the AI centers, having, documented your, what you call it now, your image, your identity, if they say that you're a criminal, nothing in this world, including a lawyer, will stop them from telling you that you're a criminal. This is the danger of surveillance. And I want you to understand that, because if any of you deal with YouTube and all these algorithmic platforms, you understand that. Nothing that you do or say to them is going to have them change their mind, because the algorithm said it. And we don't control. They're going to tell you, we don't control the system. The system is controlled independently, even though they know that it is controlled by a machine. And a machine can make a lot of mistakes. But if they say you are a criminal, can you look like somebody else? And what about us as human beings? And we should be smarter than machines. And I think we are if we use our brains. Okay? But look at how sometimes you and I confuse faces. You say, wow, that person resembles. And sometimes we go over and say hi because we think that that person is the person that we know. But it's a completely different person. Now, what happens in Trinidad or wherever you might be with a data center, and the system is tracking you, you resemble someone else, and the AI system that probably has committed a crime, and the AI system says it's you. You think you are going to get out of the hands of the government? You're not. You're not. And these are some of the things that we need to talk about. Let's get on to the thing
specifically designed to monitor every piece of religious content published online and automatically suppress anything that doesn't align with what the government wants religion to say. That's not a dystopian hypothetical. That's what China is currently building. China's National Religious Affairs Administration recently published an article announcing the establishment of a new Center for Intelligent Computing of Religious Information at Southeast University in Jiangsu province. The center's stated purpose is to use the latest generative AI tools not just to block forbidden words, but to understand the meaning behind religious content and flag anything that strays from the Communist Party's approved vision of religion in China. And if you think about it, the timing is striking. This article appeared around the same time Pope Leo XIV released his encyclical Magnificat Humanitas, which raises serious questions about freedom in the age of artificial intelligence.
One of the things that is interesting about the global elites, right? And I find it and I would do it if I were dealing with, a dumbed down populace as we are dealing with right now in our time. I would do the same thing if I were evil like them. But the fact is that, do you notice how they make wars? They distract us with these wars. People take sides with these wars, and they don't understand that the same country you're siding with, as many are siding with Chinese people, they don't understand how dangerous an agenda that the Chinese people have, and that we are actually following them, and we are going to follow them on the road to tyranny. We're following them on the road, to tyranny, because we love it. Right? The Chinese are wonderful, right? Aren't they? Right? At least they have the strongest economy, and all we think about is money. And if they're having a strong economy, it means that they're doing something right that we're not doing. So we have to follow them. don't we? They have all of these AI stuff, and if you go to China right now, they're way above the United States in terms of infrastructure, technologies, robots doing this and that, and all of these things look very attractive to the human eyes. But if we look beneath the surface, we see tyranny. But the humans are not developed in that way. We like to look at surface. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, right? And beneath the surface is what you call it now, the poison, a venom that is ready to kill you. Now, yes, Elon Musk constantly changes the algorithms on Twitter when the viral discussions go against his narrative. Absolutely. And that is what we have to, if you understand, if you're using these social media apps, you understand people that eventually they are going to be able to say who you are, what you're thinking, and you are not going to be able to say that. They're going to say to you that they're using a system that is objective, that is evidence-based, right? And what will you say when they tell you that you have stolen from X supermarket when you did not, but you resemble somebody, they're mixing you up for another person, and then they tell you that you have to go to prison? How are you going to challenge that system? You're not going to challenge it. Right? But many of you are not taking this very seriously. Now, China has always been advanced and cannot be compared to Trinidad and at all. Advanced in terms of what? Now, when you talk about advancing now, you can be advanced and be tyrannical, right? So we're not talking here about being advanced. We're talking about freedoms. How are these things going to deny us of our freedoms? That is what we have to ask ourselves, right? Now we went through censorship already. Well, you haven't seen that yet, right? You haven't seen censorship yet. What you're going through right now are the glory days of censorship, right? The real censorship has not yet happened. When they come and they take you out of your home, they drag you and they take you to the stake, then you will understand. Then you will understand what real censorship is all about. Okay, and I think that we don't understand, and it's hard for me to that what lies ahead and what is going to happen. We need to get our thoughts together. Now we have here, doesn't mean Trinidad cannot copy China. Okay, well, copy her at your own risk. And they're setting the pace for the world on everything. Absolutely, that's what the Chinese are doing, setting the pace for the world in everything. And we have here that he always, okay, bye Slimy. Why don't you go and watch your World Cup? Don't need you here. Then we have WW saying YouTube constantly pushes interracial relationships and FBA versus African and Caribbean discourse. Correct, because they want the populace to accept a certain way of thinking, right? That is what they do. And then people say that is a correct mode of thinking, and then that's it, right? Then we have, yeah, some of us are indeed a bunch of copycats, but only for things that cannot benefit us positively or in all ways. Yes, yes. And we have here Stephen that is saying, listen to Marco Rubio's recent speech, they're going to start cracking down. Yes, and the system here, the database centers, the system here that we have is to sort of control our thinking. And if we don't think in that mode, then they're going to say that we are criminals. Okay? And people are not understanding. They don't see, they just think that it's just something to have some data on, and you store your data, and tomorrow you can retrieve your data. The people of the world are least, they don't care. They don't care. They don't care. And the same thing happened with the pandemic. Many people never saw what was coming. They never saw the number of people who would have been damaged. Their health would have been damaged. Never saw it coming, right? But that is how we think it is. Yeah, we don't care who wins, Anon, if it is Spain or it is Jupiter. Who cares about Spain? The same people who are broadcasting that to you are the same people who are ready to kill you tomorrow. So you need to get that straight. Okay, so we this is what we have to get our priorities straight. Now, we have nothing wrong with Marco's speech. Well, guess what? If nothing is wrong with his speech, don't say when he tells you that you can't come on this platform and speak and say whatever you want, what is on your mind. All right, so you won't blame him, and you can't blame him, Pedro Jamot, if nothing is wrong with what he has articulated. Right, so don't blame him when you can't go on a platform because they tell you that that person is terrorist, and you're not allowed to go on the platform, because if you do go on the platform, they're going to link you with that person's sort of, personality and ID and characteristics, right? So you play and think this is a game. And this is what we are thinking, that our young people or people here think that this is a joke, right? That this is something to be laughed at and not something way serious than the pandemic that we went through. Much serious than what we went through. But let's go to another before we go and allow you to go and watch your bread and circus, right? Because that's what you're more interested in until you're hit by these people.
Being built, there's been one being built right now about 2 miles from my house, and massive data center. They're being built all over America, all over the world, and there are already data centers online, but not like we're going to see when quantum AI comes out and you have this massive computing ability where the Antichrist can track all financial, one man with that software or with that technology. He can control every financial transaction, like in China where they have the social credit system where your behavior is tracked to whether you're able to travel, whether you're able to buy and sell. That's what the Antichrist is going to be able to do, and also to surveil the entire population at the same time, knowing who's got the mark, who doesn't, who's worshiping him, who isn't, and with all the cameras, with all the technology, with AI.
Right. So this is where we're going, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we're going, and it seems to me that people are they don't care. They don't care until they care, right? They don't care until they care, and when they do care, it's going to be too late. It's going to be way too late when you wake up and you care that this is something that is toxic to any free-minded person, right? We have to become more concerned about what is happening and less concerned about that than be less concerned about who wins a football match, which has nothing to do with you. And it's just benefiting the global elites. The same people who are behind this agenda are the same people who control that football match. And then we have here, Pedro is saying, what he said you don't like. Well, it's not about liking. There are many things that can be said that we don't like. But, not liking something doesn't, I cannot like something, but it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't really endanger me. So I might not like a certain fruit, or I might not like a certain food, but that food does not endanger me. I just don't like it, right? But when you talk about now a poisonous food item that it can kill you, then that is what you have to be concerned about. It's not about just not liking something, because liking something has nothing to do with anything, because we all like and don't like things and people and whatever. But it's when something or somebody is a huge threat to your very existence that you have now got to worry and to be concerned. Right? So we have now to up the conversation, elevate the conversation. I'm not seeing the conversation as elevated as I normally see it on this platform. Then there's a lot wrong with that speech. Absolutely. There's a lot wrong with Marco Rubio himself. Marco Rubio is draconic. Marco Rubio does not like freedom. Right? And whether you agree with Cuba or not, Cuba has a right to live whatever economic model that they want to follow. Right? Whether you liked Maduro or not, he had a right to remain in his country until his tenure he had finished his term. Right? But the United States, under Marco Rubio, right, decided that he would not have done that. Right? So we have to worry about these people who actually are taking away our rights and our way of behavior. This is my way of thinking. This is my way that I conduct my country. That is okay. Leave me alone. Don't be childish. Name something that you think was wrong. Pedro Jamot, I think you need to up your conversation. You're better than that. Thinking is not very good right now. When you were asleep during COVID. Then we have Marco has new immigration rules that check your social media for anti-Trump rhetoric. Yeah, by the way, if you go back to the United States now, remember I did a video last week, if you probably didn't watch it, but this United States journalist, what is Max Blumenthal, right? He actually went to Iran because, you know, the leader there, it was his funeral. He attended the funeral of the Ayatollah. Now, upon returning to the United States, and this is a United States citizen. This is a United States citizen. He went back, having filmed, recorded whatever he recorded in Iran, and I'm sure he came back now to report on what he had observed in Iran. And when he went back to the States, they accosted him in the airport, at the Dulles International Airport, right there in Virginia, right? And actually took away his phone, seized his phone, and told him that they wanted everything that he had there. Now, we know that for foreigners, even the legal ones, once you are going through the United States airport, they have a right, if they stop you, to look at your phone and all of your interactions, your conversations. And if there's anything that is anti-Trump or anti what they want you to say, then you can be deported. And perhaps, what if to say they might deport you to a third country if they want to, right? So this is the life that we're living right now. This is a reality, and people are quite comfortable, right? They're thinking that this is a joke, right? Okay, Marco Rubio, this is just something to disagree with. This is dangerous speech. Now, they're going to crack down on certain speeches. Okay, shows like this will have to be very careful. Did you hear the same speech? Right. And we're already, as we're seeing, the algorithm is already limiting how far. We don't even know who calls into these programs, right, to these platforms, and tell them what they need to do and what channels they need to curtail, right? You know, the other night, I was on this program, the program with the cost of living, and those of you who are on that live. Now, I never used any video with any music, and you know I don't have any music here on this platform. I don't use any background music. I don't have any introduction. And YouTube sent me a message after the live, your video has been demonetized. Why? Because according to them, I used some background music. And I'm like, didn't even use any music. And all the videos that I shared, the clippings, were just people telling us about their experience with the cost of living in the Caribbean, right? Nothing, no music was behind what they were saying. And YouTube still continues to tell me that, yes, it is so. It is so, because that is, the algorithm tells them so, they're going to listen to the algorithm, right? That is what we are now. The algorithm tells them so, and this is how YouTube behaves. So can you imagine if they accost you and say that you are a criminal according to the algorithm, then you have to go to prison and you will not be defended. You will not be defended, because nobody can argue with YouTube. Nobody, because the algorithm says it, and you have to go along with the algorithm. And I'm happy people are saying that the algorithm is already conditioning people what they need to consume. So you see like, a 63K, and you're running because you think that it has something to say, something that you need to hear, and it's already conditioning your minds. Now we have anti-Trump rhetoric was out ever since. You forget people wanted to blow up the White House with him in it. So what's the point you're making here, Pedro? We know we're not here endorsing any person, being blown up. That's not what that Stephen is saying. That's not what I'm saying. We're not here that freedom of speech does not mean that we want to hear people say that they want to kill somebody. That's not what we don't endorse any violence on this channel, right? What we endorse is freedom of expression and responsible speech. That is what we endorse on this channel. Responsible speech. Now, then we have any speeches talking about doing away with international law. For example, if Barbados gets out of hand, they can do what they want, and who's going to stop them? No one. No one. And in fact, I was listening, Stephen, to another video that they're suggesting that the AI data system, the AI tracking system, the data centers are going to replace everything that has words. So you talk about, the legal profession, the medical profession, everything that can be stored will be stored in that data system, which means that they can twist and distort the laws. They can twist and distort the Constitution. They can twist and distort your image, your ID, right? And then you are going to be in problem with the law. And then they will say, well, that is what the data says. It's evidence-based, so, we can't change it. Evidence-based, according to whom? But that is the new world we're living in right now, okay? Then we have here, he was detained for telling he was detained for telling the truth. He was detained for telling the truth. Marco Rubio is a puppet white people use to get Hispanic and Latino votes. Well, the thing about it now, yes, and he's a Cuban American, and the thing about it is that he's moving in the direction of taking the United States into an autocratic state. Remember now that he stands a good chance of becoming the next president of that, if he remains in politics. I think that he is the preferred candidate based on what I'm seeing. So we have to be very careful of Marco Rubio. He could be the next Trump of the United States of America. He's moving within that direction. I thought that J.D. Vance was more dangerous, and people used to say that, but I think that Marco Rubio is more dangerous. Then we have Pedro DeMartis saying, effigies of Trump head were published by... Yes, but what is your point, Pedro? What is the point here? You need to make the point. We're not here to talk about violence. We're here to talk about connecting the dots. We're not just here to talk about the data centers. We're saying the data centers are dangerous. While they might give a few jobs, right? But we are connecting the dots now. So try to connect the dots and don't just tell me about somebody killing somebody. I don't want to hear about killings and shootings without connecting the dots, because this is not a violent channel. Steve Knight is saying your child has been the channel, right, has been demonetized because you're waking up people. It was a video, actually. It was the video that was demonetized. And I'm saying there was no music on that video. And I don't have any music on my videos anyway, right? Notice I don't use any video. I don't even edit my videos. Whatever you get online is raw. You get the raw video. There's no editing to it or what. Just make the video and upload it, publish it. I don't have any music behind it because I know YouTube can change its rules. So I'm very careful with what I do and what I say, and background music, whatever. So even the one that they permit for us to use, I don't use them, because you never know when they change the rules. They always change the rules, and I'm not going to be playing that game with them. Now, detained is arrested. And then we have the Argentina. Well, I don't care, Simon Show, who wins or loses. That's not the purpose of the show right now. Steve Knight is saying, you are very right here in, is it Delcott County? They had a town hall meeting, and that was discussed. Some of the local overseas did not know about this, correct? And then we have any channel that speaks the truth, they will demonetize. Yes. And they will try to watch, more so they will want to suppress what is happening on that channel, because the algorithm is what controls everything with whatever we do right now. And the point is fair not. Yeah, and that's the truth, that we ought not to fear, but we have to understand, though, that if we don't know the truth, because the opposite of the truth is going to be fair. Do you know that? Even people who say fear not, if they don't know the truth, when all of these things come up on them, they are going to fear. And that is what happened during the pandemic. Many people, because they didn't understand the world, they went into a mode of fear. And then they accepted, they submitted to what they were being requested of doing. By the way, do you know that the football that you're just watching, I just clicked on that, Anon and all of you guys, do you know that it's also controlled by the powers that be? They know who was going to win. Do you know that? And they order it that way. And you have your adrenaline going up, whether the Olympics or it's the World Cup, all of this is controlled, right? And you make a big shout out of it, but guess what? It's controlled, and they know who is going to win. They gamble. This is the gambling, the casino, right? That's how sport is that. and they know who is going to win, and and they do their bets, and you're losing your head and your brain over these things. Iran rebuilds bridges and railway lines in less than 24 hours, while the United States can't even fix potholes in the roads. And they can, it's only that they don't want to do it, Simon Show, because guess what? The monies that they should have been used to do that, they're directing it into wars. So they can fix it. The United States has enough, talents there to do that, but they choose not to develop their social and physical infrastructure because they want wars, and wars are expensive. So they're putting all money into wars. And that is why the United States now is collapsing physically, socially, and economically. El Monte is saying you have overlaid the video with a graphic to determine the AI algorithm. How do you do that? Can you tell me, El Monte, and send me an email? Don't tell me on don't tell me on the platform, but how do I do the overlay? And let me share my email address with you and tell me how I do that, because I don't know. I'm ignorant when it comes on to technology. I can say that. That much I can say. I'm ignorant, and I'm not ashamed to say that. Maybe I should be ashamed, but I will humble myself and say that. Let me send my email address to you, El Monte, and you can tell me how I can do that. Send me an email address and tell me how I can do that. All right, so you have to, I said that already. Then we have Anon is saying Iran is connected in spite of bridge destruction. Yeah, I would think so. I think that I think they're all connected, if that's what you mean. Well done, España. Yeah, well done, of course, and all of the things that they're doing right. Well done. Yes, they knew. Of course, they knew. Right? These from the Olympics to the World Cup, right? They're not as serious as you take them to be, right? They even when I remember I used to watch the Olympics, and even with Usain Bolt, and I remember his last race, and some of the things when you watch them, you see that some of it is staged, right? It's not real. Some things are real, don't get me wrong, but some of them are also staged, and you get all worked up. But guess what? They know who's going to win. That's all it's about. It's money involved, and they're going to guess, and they're not going to lose for you because they care about you and who you think and who you invest your interest in. They don't care. Now, another thing, Trump wants the data centers to continue his Cambridge Analytica sordid agenda, and I think you are right. I think you're right here, sir. It's collapsing, and people have to be stopped from going. Make it make sense, right? When you say, I don't understand you, Anon. You say people have to stop it from going, and then we have Stephen is saying, yeah, it's about fear because they did not do a good job during the pandemic. They did not get enough numbers because of independent media. And one of the things, though, is that they've gotten away with a lot of things. That's why they're moving on with the AI thing right now, because people are still not, they're still not alarmed by what happened during the pandemic. They're still comfortable with what they've heard, and they think that it was necessary to have done. We still think that we're living in normal times, and they're doing a lot of abnormal things right now that really irks me, right? When you look at what they're doing now and they're getting away with it, only the pandemic could have allowed them to have done that. If we were living in pre-pandemic times, all of these data centers, they could not get away with doing them as they're getting away with doing that right now. But if they got away with, injecting so many people, and so many people got ill and have died, right? Can you imagine what they will do? Right? They have the propensity, and they have the capacity to actually unalive at their own will, at their own whim. Okay? So this is what is happening right now, and we have to just take stock and try to alarm and sound the alarm, sound the bells, right? Because sound the alarm bells, and I'm shouting, saying, wake up, Caribbean people, because what is coming is going to be far more dangerous and darker than you can imagine. What lies ahead is going to be far dangerous and darker. If you think the pandemic was anything, that was like a baby, a toddler, in comparison to what lies ahead. And our people are sleeping. The Caribbean citizens are sleeping. At least Americans, even though they can't stop it, they're doing some protest, right? They're protesting. We in the Caribbean are just, ready to have parties and watch the World Cup. Now, we have here that people can't realize what happened. That's what Pedro is saying. That's why they took the injection after media was telling them not to take a Trump vaccine. Why are you so obsessed with Trump, Pedro DeMott? You seem to be obsessed with him today. I don't know why. Then we have Fazli Macabias is saying majority of people are not going to wake up. The powers are doing whatever they like. They're not even hiding their hand anymore, which is true. They're not hiding their hand. They're just saying this is what is going to be done, and whether you like it or not, it is going to be done. Because, Miss Kamala Persson did not sit down with Trinidadians and Tobagonians and say, I'm going to do this, and let me hear what you have to say about it. She doesn't care. All she knows, she's going to do it, and whether they like it or not, she's already got her money to build the infrastructure, and that is what she's going to do. Andrew Holness, when he decided to do in Jamaica, the third person national, he did not consult the populace. This was what he thought he was going to do. And like it or not, I'm going to do it. So it means, therefore, that somehow they have lost respect for the citizens of the Caribbean. And they should do so, because based on what we're seeing on this channel and this platform, it's almost like we're still teenagers. Now, Pretty Angel is saying, I remember during the pandemic, some doctors were advising patients to take the jab, and then we're laughing about it because they passed away, sick patients. Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And what is sad is that people think, don't you know that the pandemic gave people jobs too? Because they had to make, more vaccines, and they did other things, right? So talking about that, the data centers are just going to give us jobs because they're going to give us jobs. We must submit to it. I mean, we need jobs, but we need certain types of jobs. We need quality jobs. We don't need jobs that are going to what? Destroy our health and are just some temporary jobs that doing it for, building a building, probably 2 months, 3 months, and then you're unemployed again. Right? But we're not thinking. We just like to hear these little words, nice sounding words. Oh, jobs, 5,000 jobs. And we just don't know what quality jobs those 5,000 jobs are going to be. But do we care? No, because we just want a job until we know what the job entails. Now, these islands sovereign, stop pretending they are. Yeah, I'm not pretending that they are. What we're saying here, Pedro, is that we're not. I think you're right that we're not sovereign. But one of the things about human beings, we don't stop fighting until the game is over, right? So even though you might be weaker than your opponent, you still fight, right? Because once you're a man and you're a human being, you're not going to stop fighting until you can, right? So even though your opponent is a big, massive person, but you're going to fight, right, to the end. And that's what we're saying here. We're fighting to the end, even though we know that a lot of things are against us. These people are much more powerful than we are. But if we come together, though, as citizens of the Caribbean, if we unite together, if we begin to share these platforms, if we begin to have these very critical conversations, they cannot win the game. But they're winning the game because we have a region that is so much devoted to political theater. Right? And most of the podcasts in the region devoted to that political theater and drama, nothing else, and reacting to a daily story. And that is not going to get us out of the rut that we currently find ourselves in. Mm-hmm. So we need more of that, but unfortunately, this region is lacking in that. Great. I think that we're now elevating. I'm seeing now more responses that make me think that this is what we normally do, right? I was about to get off live and say, what's going on here? What's going on? Let me just show another video clipping, since I had it already on my computer. Might as well I share it with you and continue to have our discussion. Because you're doing great now. I was wondering what the hell was going on, but you are now doing much better. Let me get... You're in football mode today, so that I understand.
Interesting name. What would you call data centers Stargate. For many decades, the CIA ran something called Operation Stargate. See if it's possible to have telepathy and telekinesis. Able to transport yourself to another dimension. Also able to bring in other beings from other dimensions into you. This is an official CIA document.
For decades, not just years.
Stargate are these portals into different dimensions. But what does this have to do with AI? AI is the occult. You think that AI is run by these nerds. Oh, no, guys. The real power behind AI are occultists who want to create God.
Now, do you hear what he said? Have you heard what this guy said? And this guy is Chinese, and this guy is not religious. He's Chinese, a secular historian. He has nothing to do with religion because Chinese are not religious, right? And he has declared that. But the fact of the matter, he reads, give him his credit, and he understands. He said that they are using AI to make themselves into gods. They are using AI to make themselves into what? Into gods. Now, he talked about the whole matter of AI and the occult. I have said to you, I use ChatGPT sometimes on my, researching. And when you look at ChatGPT and what it's able to do, and the rapid way in which it's able to spit out that information, this is beyond the machine. I want to posit that this AI system is beyond the machine. We are being fooled that this is just technology. But it's more than technology. It has to do with the occult, right? And by the way, the word occult means mystical, supernatural, or magical powers, practices, or phenomena. And it's a secret study of alchemy and all of that. So we have everything is not just about what you see, is what you are not seeing. Is what you are not seeing. And there's no way that an AI system is going to, a machine is going to just, spit out information like that in less than, seconds, 30 seconds. Oh, in less than 30 seconds, you have an email drafted by AI, by ChatGPT. Now, who does that? This is beyond what human expression and idea can even explain, right? But you think it is just an ordinary stuff. You think this is just a machine and you say, right with it, and you play around with it. And you don't understand that it's much more than you are seeing at the surface level. It is much more than you are seeing at the surface level. Now, if they can do that with AI, and I don't even have the paid version of ChatGPT, I have the free version, right? Now, what will they do to people who have the paid version and also to the AI data centers, right? What are they going to do with that system? And how are they going to surveil you and control you? Okay. Now, we have here the citizens pay for the AI data. Correct. And this is a point I should have mentioned. And thank you for bringing that point, WWT. The citizens pay for the AI data centers. That's why water and electric bills are higher. Let's talk about that. We are already in a system, WWT, in which people are complaining that their electric bills are too high, that their water bills are too high, and they're already not getting the system, the service that they should be getting. The young miss from Trinidad was complaining that in some parts of Trinidad, they have frequent, power outages, and also water is not in the tap a lot of times when they need it. Now, if the government of Trinidad and Tobago cannot supply consistent water supply, service, how is it going to now have a data center that consumes a lot of electricity and water? Right? Now, the people are going to now be complaining and crying when the system shall have been built in Trinidad and Tobago. When after the fact that it has been built, you're going to cry. You're going to cry. When the cancers are, you don't know where the cancers are coming from. You're going to cry. That's the time you're going to cry. and you can't be helped at the time because you would have made your decision, right? You would have made your decision. And that is what we're looking at here on this live broadcast. Now we have here, if you know that, why take part? And we have convenience and they have same thing. I was the king. I was I see what you're saying, Pedro. Let me go back to Pedro's statement because you said something which caught my attention. Yes, I think you're right. I think that I should be blamed too. Let me just be, truthful with you. We are all hypocrites because we're using the system. I mean, we have to use this, YouTube, because we have no other way to connect with other people and to share our thoughts. But in terms of the chat GPT and this AI thing, as you're saying, Pedro, we should not use it. I think the best thing for us, if the large majority of us as human population see it as, something that's going to control us and also bring about diseases because of the health hazards, right? Then I think we should refrain, we should desist from using it. You are right. You are right. And I give that prop to you because I thought of that when I was preparing for the live, and you said it very well, Pedro. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that is true. That if we stop using this chat GPT and this nonsense, I think that they have to give in. But because we're using it and they're making monies, they're not going to stop. Same thing I was thinking. Then we have here, we have from Pedro, Caribbean islands sits on water and is surrounded by water, yet still are considered water scarce. That is the irony of the whole matter. Why are we not having water in our tap? Why? Because the government and the private sector, notice that in the 1990s, ladies and gentlemen, the 1990s, early 2000s, they started in the Caribbean to privatize everything. The electric companies were privatized. The water companies were privatized because they knew where they were moving to, right? And it's all about business. They understood the agenda years in advance. They were planning for this. WWT says ChatGPT is a plagiarizer. It just takes information from other websites and sum it up. A lot of time it's incorrect. You are correct. In fact, it's now coming out. If you look at ChatGPT right now, it's telling you at the bottom that, ChatGPT is not always correct and does not always dispense accurate information. If you notice, that's what they're doing now. They're trying to save themselves because they realize that, yes, it spits out a lot of nonsense too, right? So you're correct, WWT. Stephen is saying Barbados can barely supply fresh water. Why would you allow a multi-million-dollar corporation to do this? Right, because it's profitable for the corporation. And they have to do it because that's how they're going to control and usher us into the digital economy. Yeah? So this is nothing they're just doing it because they want to do it. They're doing it because they're making money, for one, and they have the agenda. And the agenda is to have a digital controlled economy where everything that you do will be controlled. Everything that you do will be controlled. Now, Pedro is saying they signed the Paris Agreement and boldly trying to implement the UN goals. Right. You're right. It is what it is. Even the pandemic and all of that, the climate change, was all a part of the climate change agenda. Right? The Paris Agreement, even though Trump is suggesting that he's not in agreement with the Paris Agreement, but most of them are. Right? Most of them are, in fact, in agreement. All right, so thank you so much for joining and participating in the live. Make sure you like the live, and we'll see each other another time. All the best to you. Ciao.